Okay, today the agenda is made of 3 main points: syllabus review. So we are going to review the new syllabus because you remember the previous one is over. Then we start the first topic, which is hazardous environment, but we will base on those resulting from earthquakes. Then later we will summarize our lesson with reference to the objectives. If you allow me, I can go on with the syllabus review. The new syllabus that they have posted is not different from what we used to have, and it will take 2021 to 2022. It shows the content of AS and the content of A-level. AS is still made of 2 papers, core physical geography and the core human geography. And in core physical geography, we still have the other 3 topics you have covered. I mean hydrology and fluvial geomorphology, atmosphere and weather, and rocks and weathering. Paper 2, which is the core human geography, is made of population, migration, and settlement. Then A-level is made of 2 papers as well, paper 3 and paper 4. Paper 3 is advanced physical geography, and it is made of 4 topics, but we are required to cover 2 options, 2 topics from the 4 topics. And on our side, as I told you before, we have chosen hazardous environments and the hot, arid, and semi-arid environments because they are somehow related to what you have covered in physical geography before, in the rocks and weathering and atmosphere and weather. Again, when you go to the last paper, which is paper 4, advanced human geography is also made of 4 topics, but we are required to do 2 topics from the 4. And as I told you before, I chose the more geographical topics, and I avoided more economical topics, and we chose these 2: production, location, and change, the first one, and the second is environmental management. So in a few words, that's how the syllabus is, and it is the same as it was before. Maybe what is interesting when we are starting a certain syllabus, it is assessment part of the syllabus. So as we used to be instructed in the previous syllabus, paper 1 and paper 2 are of AS, and as you know, the candidates are free to do paper 1 and paper 2 in the one series, the first series, like May, June, and do paper 3 and 4 in another series, so separately, as we used to plan before this COVID breaks out. But the last alternative is possible also to have the 4 papers done at the same time, and this is the last. This last alternative is what you are doing. You are doing paper 1, paper 2, paper 3, and paper 4 in the same examination series. And when you do the 4 papers at the same time, I'm scrolling back down to the table. You are doing the whole A level at the same time with the last column, and each paper there has 25% of the overall marks. But when you are doing only AS, which you are not concerned with today, the two papers have 50-50%. So both of them, each one has 50, another 50 to make a total of 100% with the marks for your AS. So this first column is not, you are not concerned with it, but you are concerned with the last column of A level. And going in specifications or details for each paper, paper 1, section A will be made of 3 data response questions which are compulsory. Each question carries 10 marks, so that will be 30 marks. And I think this is what you used to have. Section B will also be made of 3 questions, 3 structured questions, but you have a choice of answering only one question from those 3, and each question carries 30 marks plus the 30 marks of section A. The total will be 60 marks, and the period, the time for the paper is 1 hour 30. It is the same thing as paper 2, section A, section B, and the time. Paper 3 and paper 4 also, they have the same structure. Remember, we only do 2 topics, not 3 topics in a section. No, I mean paper 3 and paper 4. How they are assessed? Leila, can you mute? Leila. Merci. Paper 3 and paper 4, the way they are assessed, each topic from the 2 is given with 3 questions. So each paper here has 12 questions, but because you only are concerned with two topics, so we have 6 questions that you can answer. Let me repeat. Because the paper assesses the 4 topics you have seen before in the syllabus review above, but each candidate or each school chooses 2 topics to tackle, and each topic is given with 3 questions, so the whole paper is made of 4 topics times 3 questions per each topic. Those are 12 questions. But a candidate is able to answer 6 questions because he has studied 2 topics from the 4 topics. And now let me be specific to each topic. For one topic which has 3 questions, the first question of those 3 is a structured question, and it is out of 10 marks. It is compulsory. Then the next 2 questions after that question are essay questions. Each question is 20 marks, and when you add up the total, I mean, before you go to the total, those 2 questions, you choose only one question. So the total of that topic is 30. Because you have done 2 topics, then it will be 30 plus 30, the total will be 60. I mean, that is for paper 3 and paper 4. About assessment, I think I'm done. I was viewing the syllabus, the scheme of work. They didn't change anything because you see the structure is the same as what you used to have in the previous syllabus. So we'll have the same objectives. I will be sharing them with you per each topic, syllabus objectives. And I think I have shared this to your WhatsApp, but I will also put it on our Google Class so that you are able to have access to the syllabus and any other material that I will have prepared. I will post it on Google Class. Something else maybe I can talk about is objectives. Normally, objectives are classified into four. There is knowledge, and under knowledge, you can see what they test. You give some definitions. You need to be able to remember some principles or theories or models. You need to be remember to recall some locations, some characters, some environments or some places. Be able to say some physical or human processes or factors. Just remembering, it's part of what they assess. Second, you should be able to understand what you are remembering. So those are some of the objectives that they also consider. The reason why I'm talking about objectives, it's because I'm going to show you how a percentage of these objectives when it comes to examination. It helps you to prepare for examinations. So you see, you should be able to apply some geographical knowledge, recognize some significant spatial scale and time scale. I mean here understanding what is displayed. And the skills, it's like you manipulate geographical data. Then later evaluation to be able to give your judgment and support it with some evidences. Now, if I go down here a bit in the percentages, the first table here is for AS papers. It shows, for the whole syllabus, but for different papers. Like in paper 1, knowledge has 30%. So you should be able, when you are doing paper 1 and paper 2, they have the same characteristics. You should be able to remember some definitions, should be able to state some things, that some data. In other words, you need to use your brain much to reproduce what you have covered. Objective 2, because it has 30%. Next, the second objective is understanding, or should be able to explain what you have memorized. After memorizing something, should show understanding of that thing. This is for paper 1, paper 2, core papers. The next is the application. I mean, skills. Use geographical skills, called application, manipulate data. So you should be able to interpret data, but also manipulate them to see the relationships, how one affects another one, like that. You remember that's where you have the graphs, and you have different variables, and this affects this factor affects this in this way. Those are manipulation. And the last three, evaluation, like using evidences to show your stand and support it, it has 12%. In other words, core papers are more concerned about what you know, what you can explain, what you can manipulate. But evaluation or assessment, judging, supporting your judgment or using evidences has a lower percentage. But when it comes to A level, paper 3 and paper 4, you will see that those three components that were high before, I mean knowledge, understanding, and the application of geographical skills, have 20%, are lower than the last objective of evaluation, like using evidences and you support your judgment. You come to a judgment and support it from the evidences. It has 40%. You see, it goes high. What does this mean? It means that if you want to excel in paper 1 and paper 2, you should be able to focus on the content, put it on your hard disks. You remember where your hard disks are. Some are here, others here, others here, others here. I don't know. Put it there so that anytime you need to use it, you are able to bring it back. That is memorizing. Second, you should be able to analyze, to understand and explain what you have memorized. It's not just getting everything and put in head without being able to explain them. Because second objective with 30% is requiring you to explain. And number next, you should also be able to use that to conflict data to see how one affects another one. And to a lower extent, you are required to do evaluation. But in paper 3 and 4 A-level papers, you are highly requested to evaluate to take a judgment and evaluate it using the evidences. Evidences are what? Those are case studies. So in paper 3 and 4, case studies are highly recommended. So most of these essay questions of out of 20 marks you have seen there, I told you in the assessment, each paper has 40 marks for case study essay questions, 40 out of 60. You understand the percentage. These people are good at mathematics. If you take 40 times 100 over 60, it is just a C, 66%. It is a C already with the case studies. You understand that the case studies are highly recommended in A level than in AS. Because AS it has only 12%, and here it has 40% of the whole paper. I think briefly that's what I can say, but maybe lastly, there are some terms I've seen here that you need to know. Command words. The command words are the words that are used in the examination. So sometimes you are given a question and you don't understand what it is asking. So that's what the command word is. There are explanations of command words. Like when they say account, you are giving reasons for something that they are talking about. They said account for something, so they are asking you reasons for that thing. If they say assess is the same as evaluate, or how far do you agree? You give your judgment, but you support it with evidence. So questions out of 20 mostly are in terms of assess. To what extent do you agree? Evaluate. Because you need to use data from case studies to support your judgment. And that's why I always tell you, remember the questions out of 15 marks in the AS. I used to tell you, start with your stand, support it with data, concludes supporting your stand. So that's how it is. It's the same structure, only that here you get more marks. You get 20 out instead of getting 15. But you give your stand. After giving your stand, that is your judgment, what you believe in. Support that stand with data. Then data from where? I mean evidence from case studies. Then conclude based on what you discussed in the body to support your introduction. When they say calculate, this is easy. You give numerical data. And when you are comparing, you are asked to give both similarities and differences. It's not only differences. You only give differences when you are asked to contrast. But when you are asked to compare, you give both similarities and differences. You know what define is? Everyone here so far can do it. Now describe, you state key characteristics that you see. They normally ask you to describe the figures or the diagram. They give you data and you are asked to describe. So there you give the key characteristics you see and support that with data, like facts you see in that diagram or that figure they have given to you. Discuss. It is easy. It's just presenting points for and against a certain view or a certain uh, thing they are asking you to discuss. So you give points for and points against. To draw, you normally know it. You use your hands and you make a sketch, and it doesn't need to be perfect. You make sure that you labeled. That's why later down they ask you to label. When you have a diagram without label, it doesn't make sense. And evaluate, I said it. Examine. You do like investigation. You do it. Exam is too big a bit. You give description, you explain, you give evidence. You can comment on those evidences. You say this is like not correct according to me. It's fake. You are free, but you are free to talk openly about what you are examining. And when you say explain, you give reasons, or you can give causes, or you can give purposes. And you need to understand that when you are describing, you are not explaining, except if you are asked to explain and describe and explain. So when it comes to these questions, I was showing you there in the AS and A level. In AS, where they ask you to describe, in A level, they ask you to explain. And that is why you have seen the questions out of 10. Let me go, it will be far a bit. Questions about explain out of 10, they say they are structured questions and they are out of 10. They also are data response questions, but they don't ask short answers. They ask you to show deeper understanding of what you have seen there. They don't ask you to describe only, they also ask you to explain or link it to the content or to the topic you are doing. They sometimes give a figure and you look like you can't quickly link it to the topic you are doing, but it is your duty now to link the data you have been given to the topic you are doing. It is more like demanding than the questions out of 10 in AS. So that's where explain comes in. And when you are asking to give, this is very easy. It's just small answers. You just give small answers. Give the meaning. It's just giving the definitions of what you have asked to give the meaning of. Give reason. I think this is clear. You provide points of explanations. And when you are asked to say how, I think this is easy. You say which way is this? Things have happened or things are working. How far do you agree I said it? Identify, it is easy. You name or you select one or more characteristics depending on what they have asked you. Label, I said it. You put names of specific names on the diagram. And in name, it is just giving an appropriate name or a term to something that they are asking you to name. If it is a diagram and they have put A and they say name what A is, you understand that it's just the term for that A. And the outline, it is just stating, you give without explanation. You don't need to give the details when you are asked to outline. And the state, you also give a short answer but which is clear. These are easy. Then suggest, uh, sometimes you confuse it with the outline, but you see it is a bit more advanced in terms of thinking because it asks you to apply your knowledge and your understanding to an familiar situation so that you can get to a certain answer. So it requires you to think more than you can do in the outline and they give a state. So with the suggest, you have more task of thinking, and they sometimes suggest provides more answers. Like if you are 10 students in a class, you can have 10 different answers which are correct to the question. So depending on how you have reasoned. And that is why, because you are giving your own reasoning, you should make sure that it is understandable. You don't just write a rock and you think that people will understand what rock is. Leila, you are unmuting? No. To what extent I said it? What? It is easy. You just provide the specific information. It's the same as which, but why you give a reason or the purpose. So this is shared with you. You can take time and go through them, but I think so far, when a question is given, you can know the boundaries, the scope of that question. If you have any questions so far, and let me know, and before you go to the next agenda. Yes, Misa.
Like see the things you had explained before, like about
How?
how they give us math.
Mm.
Before you talked about the essay part, I didn't hear anything. My internet was slow.
Before I said about?
The essay part,
Mm.
I didn't hear anything. My internet was slow.
Essay questions require you to introduce your essay with your stand. You support your stand with the facts from the case studies, and you conclude your essay with quoting some facts from the evidences to support your stand. Still, when you are giving a stand, because the stand are meaning your judgment, what you believe in, you still are free to also challenge it and show the however side you can believe something to 70% maybe, and 30% is not correct. You still are free to give it, but in the essay questions, the three main parts are needed. But focusing on your stand, focusing on your judgment. So those essay questions are asked in terms of assess, how far do you agree, evaluate. To what extent do you agree? Clear? Welcome. Anyone else? You want to talk, you unmute and talk. You are few, we don't need to. If you say yes, I will step forward.
Teacher.
Mm-hmm.
Teacher, I wanted to ask.
Camera. Mm-hmm. Put your video on and keep on. Video on and keep on. Daniela? She's no longer there. Who else has a question?
Wait.
Who?
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to ask
Mm-hmm.
about how we'll be doing the papers during when we go back to school. Like, how will we be sitting for the papers, like for exams and revising everything? How will we be doing that?
Doing the papers, it is easy. It is just following the timetable. And that is why I'm very concerned about us finishing the syllabus early so that we can have more time for revision. If nothing changes, we can end this syllabus by December, as I told you yesterday, so that we have like those 5 months for revision. So I think the revision will be enough by then. And what will be remaining is for us to follow the timetable of the Cambridge for CIE.
So, teacher, when we go back to school, will we be doing mainly paper 4?
We will be studying paper 4 and 5, paper 3 and 4, but when you are done with it, we will be doing 4 papers. Like at the end of December, we are likely to do 4 papers.
Okay.
The end of our first time in next year. Because like for me, my first time is this one. Because you have covered the AS, we don't need to keep on talking about the AS when you still have A level that is pending behind. If I start,
So we'll focus mainly on paper 4 when we go back to school. Then later we'll go for paper 1.
all of them, all of the paper, all of the 4 papers, I mean, because we need to get ready for CIE. In fact, that's what we were avoiding before when we wanted you to do AS before, because when you have 2 papers, it becomes easy for preparation. But again, if you are not doing the 4 papers are still up to us, we should get some strategies of having a proper revision. And that is why I am encouraging everyone here to work hard so that we finish this syllabus by December.
Okay.
And
Thank
then,
you.
welcome. Any other? None else. Okay. The breakdown I'm about to start in my first topic. So you are free to have your notebooks and your pens. So as I told you, we are starting with the hazardous environment. Is this the slide that is in there? And the hazardous environments are of three. No, they can be many, but in our syllabus, they ask us to discuss three main hazardous environments. We have hazardous environments resulting from tectonic processes. When we say tectonic processes, we mean processes involving plates. And the second one will be hazards resulting from mass movement. The last one will be hazards resulting from atmospheric disturbances. And for after each topic, they bring a last part which says sustainable management of a certain environment. So if you are talking about hazardous environments today, it will be sustainable management of hazardous environments. If you go to arid and semi-arid environments, it will be sustainable management of arid and semi-arid environments. And that is a case study. As you can see, the last part 9.4, it is a case study that you have to know. Now, with your permission, I can start hazardous environment resulting from tectonic processes. If you say you are ready, let me know. I like
Teacher,
that. Yes, sir. That is Sam.
tectonic processes.
Mm.
What are they?
I think you have them in the window. They are not there. I have shared it. It is there.
Oh, yeah, I can see them.
I have 91 hazards resulting from tectonic processes. 2. Resulting from mass movement. 3. Resulting from atmospheric disturbances. Last, sustainable management of hazardous environment. I start?
Yeah.
Now,
Yes.
before you go on, you can now see that what you are about to see in this topic, the only one thing that is new is the hazards resulting from atmospheric disturbances. 91 and 92 are already done. We have seen uh, plate tectonics, you have seen types of plates, you have seen which plates are associated with the volcanic eruption, which plates are associated with the earthquakes. That's the foundation of this. Then later, what we are concerned about today, it's not the diagrams. We are concerned about the hazards that can be due to volcanic eruption and due to earthquakes. That's what you are doing in that first topic. I think you understand that it was easy. And the second, it is resulting from mass movement, and you have seen it in the last part of our rocks and weathering. Our 3.3, it is the mass movement. So far we know the types of mass movement. Now the next will be which hazards can be due to mass movement. It becomes very easy. That's why I chose this topic. And a new thing, it will be atmospheric disturbance. So you will go outside and you will be telling people that you have attended geography at Wellspring Academy International. Okay. As you can see still here in the syllabus, they say that the first part you have to do is a global distribution of earthquakes and volcanoes as they are associated to plate tectonics. But I will not choose to start this before I remind you about plate tectonics. So I think it will make more sense. And again, I will not take earthquakes and volcanoes at the same time. Let me start from earthquake, then later we go to the volcano, then I think it will make more sense than mixing them up. If you say yes, I step forward.
Yes.
I thank you so much. Let me see if this will work for me. Yes. Types of plate boundaries. You remember we have seen four types of plate boundaries. You even have a table in your notebook. The first one is constructive plate boundary. The second is the destructive plate boundary. Third is the collision zone. And the last is the conservative or transform plate boundary. Where is this I want to share with you? It is this one. And I've shared. And you remember that you have seen that all plate boundaries are associated with the earthquakes, but not all plate boundaries are associated with the volcanic eruption. Only two plate boundaries are associated with the volcanic eruption. Destructive plate boundary and constructive plate boundary. Down here, you have a diagram. It shows these red arrows are showing the plate boundaries. Yes. And below the blue part, which represents sea, you see the ocean, the oceanic crust in red, and below again, which color will it be that? I don't know. That is the magma. It's the mantle. And the yellow arrows you see there are showing the movement of magma. So as you see, starting from the left part of the diagram, you see there is a red arrow that's coming towards here, and it is converging with another red arrow. So what is happening there is subduction, and you can see on the one plate is sinking and another plate there is forced to rise above that one that is sinking. And behind there is rise of magma which is forming island arcs. May I confirm that everyone is able to see where the island arcs are? Unmute and talk.
Yes, teacher.
Yes.
So you see,
Yes.
island
Yes,
arcs.
teacher.
Thank you. Island arcs are these. The arc is this chain of these volcanoes that are forming after subduction. And then that line between the two plates will be the trench. That's where the big depression, the V-shaped depression will be forming. So as this happens, the earthquake also is produced. You remember that between these two plates, where one is subducting, that's where you have the Benioff zone, where we have a deeper earthquake focus. Focus means where the earthquake is produced. So there is a strong earthquake that is produced with subduction. So you understand that earthquakes take place where there is subduction. Agree? Agree?
Yes, teacher.
That's the first distributions. Wherever there is subduction, there is earthquake, as there are volcanic eruption. But because we are starting from earthquake, wherever you see subduction, either on the map or a diagram, understand that there is earthquake. And even you see these landforms that they put here, like trench, oceanic, and island arcs, they cannot even tell you what's happening there, but they label the landforms like trench and island arcs. You understand that trench is a landform of subduction. So if it is a landform of subduction, it means that around that area there will be strong earthquakes. So I mean, if they bring a map and show you a trench, and they say, why do we have more earthquakes here? It is just because around that trench, it is subduction, and with subduction there will be earthquake. Moving aside, after that subduction, you see that now we have where magma is rising with the two yellow arrows, but due to divergence, you see the red arrows above in the ocean are moving sideways. So this causes the magma to rise up and it forms mid-ocean ridge. So as the movement of plate takes place, earthquake happens, and as volcano happens, also earthquake happen. So wherever there is volcanic eruption, there is also earthquake. But wherever there is earthquake, there is no volcanic eruption. Volcanic eruption causes earthquake, but earthquake doesn't cause volcanic eruption. You understand? Then behind, you see the middle of the ocean, you see ocean ridge, the mid-ocean ridge. I said that volcanic eruption causes earthquake. So wherever there is volcanic eruption, earthquake for sure happens. But earthquake doesn't cause volcanic eruption. And on the same diagram, you see the mid-ocean ridge is in red. But in the middle of the ocean, you can see that what was one mid-ocean ridge that was crossing the sea, one part has been pushed towards, like the ridge has been cut, and one part moved ahead a bit, you can see. So that shows that there has been sliding of plates. See, the plates didn't diverge, didn't converge, but one moved along another one, sliding past another one. That's it, transform. And you see, they even put transform for it. So it is a conservative plate boundary. So with that, there will be earthquake also, because there has been transform or conservative movement. That time there will be also earthquake. Number last, about plate boundaries, it is the collision, which is not shown here, but I think it is shown somewhere down here. You collision, where are you? Come up, 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 come up. Hey, I don't know where it has gone. Collision, where did you go? Oh, there's no diagram. But with the collision, you know, two continental plates converge, and because they have the same density, they fold up. So they converge like this, then fold up. Converge, fold up. Converge, fold. So if they fold up, that's what you call mountain building. So they build mountains. And the example here is Himalayas, the chain of mountains that formed due to collision between Indian plate and Eurasian plate or Eurasian plate.
Teacher, what does that cause earthquakes?
They cause earthquakes.
Yeah.
How? Look, if these plates are converging and they fold up, as they are moving, there will be shaking of the ground.
Oh.
And remember what earthquake is? It is shaking of the ground. So wherever there is mass, wherever there is a movement of plates, there is earthquake.
Thank you.
Teacher, can you move up? We are seeing mountain building.
But it is here. It doesn't have a diagram here. Can I step forward?
Yes.
So far
Yes.
about the distribution of earthquakes.
Yes.
Thank you. So far about the distribution of earthquakes, understand that wherever there is plate boundary, there is earthquake. There is only one thing I didn't tell you where earthquakes also can be produced, apart from around plate boundaries. And there I will be done with the distribution. I only will be showing you a slide and you can read for yourself, nothing else. It is one. It is around hotspots. You remember that not all volcanoes erupt around plate boundaries. Some of the volcanoes erupt around hotspots. So, and I told you that wherever there is volcanic eruption, there is earthquake. So you understand that around hotspots also there will be earthquakes. And the examples will be there, like the Hawaiian hotspots. There is volcanic eruption, but they also that place is also affected by earthquakes because of those eruptions. So, in few words, the distribution of earthquake can be around all plate boundaries. I mean, constructive, destructive, collision, and transform, plus around hot spots. That's the theoretical. What is remaining is for you to go and get examples around the hotspot. Which hotspot? Around subduction. Which areas are affected by subduction? Around the divergence. Which places are affected by divergence? Like that. And that is what you call A level. Now, let me come back to you. Let me show you a bit of distribution, then I will stop the distribution from there and we'll talk about hazards. I told you that we will talk about earthquakes only without volcanic eruption. Today, the objectives that we have to work on will be the following. We are defining the earthquake. We see the causes of earthquakes. we see the distribution of earthquakes. So you see the third objective is our first objective in the syllabus, but you can't talk about distribution of earthquakes when you don't know the causes, because they distribute or they are located somewhere due to the causes. That's why I structured it like that. I want us to know what causes earthquakes, and it is easy. I said it is plate movement and volcanic eruption. So I think this is done. And then later we'll see the hazards resulting from earthquakes. Later we see impacts. Then we will see the factors affecting earthquake damages, and we suggest ways of reducing damages due to earthquakes. Do you have an objective that's not clear so that I can first tell you what it means? So are all clear? Can I step forward?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Causes of earthquakes, I told you the natural causes are plate tectonics and volcanic eruption, but sometimes people can also contribute to earthquakes, can cause earthquakes, though the intensity is low, but they also can produce some earthquakes. I think you have seen when a big truck is passing close to you, you feel some shaking. That's also earthquake, but with a minor intensity, which can cause limited damages. But walls close to where trucks pass shake and sometimes break. Some man-made causes of earthquakes are disposal of liquid waste in the underlying rocks. When I say underlying rocks, I'm meaning underground. So they sometimes dispose liquid waste which are chemically toxic to rocks. So when they reach there, they can deteriorate the rocks, and in the next future, because the rocks have been weakened, they will be for like faulting. Like rocks will be unable to keep on sustaining the weight above it, and they will loosen and fall down. So if the land falls a bit, there will be some vibration, which will be earthquake. And underground nuclear testing, this is clear when they are testing the nuclear weapons in underground. You understand that they can produce some shakings of the ground. And fracking of shale rocks to extract soil, I mean shale oil and natural gas. What happens normally here is there are some rocks which contain some oil and natural gas. It is hard for them to be exploited because those rocks don't allow the oil or natural gas to flow towards where they are extracting the oil and natural gas. So it is like they are closed in there. What happens then? People use their hard engineering to introduce pipes in those rocks. You understand that they are breaking those rocks, and they introduce pipes in there to extract those oil and natural gas. So that time when they are introducing them in there, they cause vibration and they cause earthquakes. They sometimes introduce like two pipes. One pipe is pumping air or oil or water, and it pushes the oil that was there. Wait. I'm meaning if this is the shale oil, are you able to see here?
Yes.
So they can put one pipe here and another pipe here. This pipe is pumping air or water to where the reserve of shale oil is. So when it is pumping it, it causes the water or air mixed with oil or gas to come out in the next pump, in the next pipe. So as they are pushing down here to push what was underground to come out with our next pipe, they cause vibrations. That's what we call fracking. Fracking is like introducing liquid or gas in that store of oil and the natural gas so that it can come out through another pipe. I think it is understandable.
Yeah.
And when they are increasing surface load, like when they're constructing dams, how this cause earthquakes? It is due to overweight. Rocks below become unable to keep on sustaining that big weight. So they break and start sinking. So that breaking and sinking causes some vibrations. I step forward.
No.
Mhm.
Maybe repeat cross-loading.
I gave you an example of when people construct dams. With crust loading, you are putting weight on the crust. So an example is when you construct a dam, water accumulates above the surface. So the surface used to be free. Now you are accumulating the weight of that water that is contained in the dam above that surface. You are loading that crust. So how it causes earthquake is because of increased weight above that crust. The rocks below, which used to keep the shape of the land like that, become unable to sustain that weight. So they start breaking and sink. So if they break and sink, that's the movement already. So that movement causes vibrations.
Okay.
I step forward. The
Yeah.
distribution of earthquakes, I said it. I only here added some examples of where the constructive plate boundary is, like along mid-ocean ridges, where the destructive plate boundary is, like in the South American plate boundary, or the western part of South America, where Nazca plate is right below the South American plate. I also gave you an example of collision zone around the Himalayas, where the Indian and Eurasian plates converge and they cause collision or they cause fault mountains. I also give you an example of conservative plate boundary or along Californian San Andreas fault line where there are also big or strong earthquakes. Then I'll also give you an example of the example of what spot will be around the Hawaiian hotspots. You can add it, Hawaiian hotspots. I step forward. So this is the map that is talking about the distribution I said before. I don't know if you are able to see the cursor in your screen. Are you able to see the cursor in your screen?
Yeah.
Okay, so here is where the subduction is taking place. It's South American plate and the Nazca plate. So here will be earthquake due to subduction. Up here is where there is a Californian San Andreas fault line. So it is transform plate boundary and there are also earthquakes. And here it is the mid-ocean, mid-Atlantic ridge. Here there is a constructive plate boundary. Around here, that's where Indian plate collides with the Eurasian plate, then in this part of the Pacific is also due to subduction. Remember, that's where there is the Pacific Ring of Fire. But when you open up the maps with the readings, you can see where the subductions, where there are trenches, where there are fault lines, where there are ridges. Everywhere you see the ridge or those names, those landforms associated with plate boundaries will be associated with the earthquakes. Number next, Blessing, you look like sleeping. Okay.
So can you not move this part? Can you first read it?
This one that is displayed, hazards due to earthquakes. It is still there. I am first differentiating for you the hazards and impacts. Because some students are mistaken. I don't want you to be mistaken. No. Hazard and impact.
Excuse me, teacher.
The hazard is something that is associated with the agent of, like, let's talk about earthquake. If earthquake is happening, what does it have that can cause harm, that can cause, that can affect the natural environment or that can affect people? That's what you call hazard. What the earthquake has that can cause the damages to the environment or to the people. Then impacts are those I was saying. So the consequences of what the earthquake has on the environment. So if I give you the example over here, in the hazards, primary hazards of earthquake, there is ground shaking. With the earthquake, there is ground shaking. But the ground shaking itself is not an impact. It is not a damage, but it can cause a damage. You understand the difference? So the damage is the impact. But what causes impact is what you call hazard. So sometimes you are asked to explain the hazards due to earthquake or due to any other hazardous agent, then you give impact. That is wrong. Hazard is that thing that the hazardous event has that cause damage. Another thing that is in primary hazard is surface faulting. Surface faulting means a surface that used to be flat like this, one goes down. See, that's what you call faulting. Secondary hazards now, ground failure and soil liquefaction. Ground failure and soil liquefaction, some people are a bit confused about it. When you see it happening outside, you may think that there has been rainfall or there has been flooding, but it's not flooding in your sense. What happens as the ground shakes, as it shakes, groundwater, you remember in your paper 1, drainage basin system. After infiltration is percolation, and after percolation, groundwater. And you remember infiltration supplies soil moisture. So the water that is contained in the soil, when ground is shaking, is forced to come up. So it wets the soil towards up towards the surface, and it keeps on wetting it up to when it reaches to the surface. Or it can even fail to reach to the surface, but as it is wetting it upwards, it causes the soil or it causes the ground to become loose, to become unstable. So that time the ground becomes weak so that it can't support heavy materials above it, like buildings, like trucks, like anything that is heavy fails to stand straight. That time you can find the cars are sinking in the road. The road used to be dry. There was not precipitation. There was not flooding, but you find that the car after earthquake it is sinking. And what happened? Water was rising from the bottom of the soil back to the surface and it made the soil loose so that it is not able to hold heavy materials. Tsunamis, you know them, those tall waves of the oceans. As the ocean shakes, the waves move, so they can cause coastal flooding, but those are impacts. Coastal flooding, like the materials that will be affected, those are impacts. But tsunamis are those tall waves which flood the coast or the coastal area. And later, another secondary hazard that you have is mass movement, and I think you understand, you have seen it before that one of the causes of mass movement will include earthquakes. So these are hazards. Do you have anyone who has one that is hard for him or her?
Could you repeat ground?
Ground failure or liquefaction? I don't know.
What?
Ground failure. So you want me to repeat this?
Yes.
Okay. You see, the surfaces that are shown there, like where the building is, one side is bent, one side is sinking, another side is not sinking. And the two cars here are sinking also, but water is coming out. So what happened? It's not because of precipitation, it is because of earthquake. When the ground shakes, the groundwater and soil moisture comes back to the surface, weighting the soil and making the soil loose to sustain bigger or heavy materials. Here you can stand as a person who is not heavy, but the car which is heavy will sink. Here, small buildings can withstand, but tall buildings which are heavy will not withstand because soil has become loose as the water was rising back to the surface. So we see it is sinking back to down in the soil. So that's what happens with soil liquefaction.
Teacher, I have a question.
Yes, boss.
What
Thank you.
happens when the soil dries up?
When the soil,
Dries up, like when the water dries.
come
Do
again.
those cars remain inside the soil?
Oh, after it dries.
Yeah.
Yes. You can have some holes remain there because after the ground has failed, some soil particles can become compact to a higher extent so that it leaves a depression. So it is possible you can find some depression after as water dries up. If you want, you can go and Google and type soil liquefaction or ground failure. You will see them. Those you will see this with the water, but you will see also others which have dried. It is possible.
I have another question.
That is Leila or Daniela. Yes, Daniela. Your camera is not on. Yes.
So nyine that soil recognition 100 cyangwa impact.
Does it have what?
Is it a hazard impact?
It's a secondary hazard. But it causes impact. You see, like in here in this diagram, in this photo, you see the impact. See, the cars are sinking. That is an impact. But having water coming back to the surface, that's what you call soil liquefaction or ground failure. This building that is tilting, it is an impact. Some people here can fall off. Those are impacts. But due to what? Due to the secondary hazard here. And that's why you see I've made them separate. Primary, secondary, later we'll see the impact.
Okay. Thank you.
Welcome. Now, I don't need to talk about impacts because everyone here can know what impacts, which impact can be resulting from earthquakes. Maybe some of you, no, like loss of lives, I don't need to talk about it. Everyone knows. Loss of livelihood. Livelihood means everything that's helping people to keep on living. Like it can be their businesses, it can be their farmlands, it can be anything that is providing them means of living. That's what you call livelihood. So if it is lost, people are unable to keep on living well. The destruction of structures, I think this I don't need to talk about it. Interruption of water supplies, you understand that some pipes can break, so it is clear. Breakage of sewage systems, so you understand that some sewage systems can break off and the dirty water or waste are exposed to the public, and that's why there are some diseases that can affect people that are experiencing that damage, as some gas and electric supplies can be interrupted or can break off. Some dams can break, the walls of the dams can break, and if they break, you understand that there will be flood in downstream because there was too much water held behind the wall. So if the wall breaks, too much water will be exposed outside and it will be flooding. It will cause flooding downstream. Oh, that's what I said. Some materials can be released as buildings are breaking or structures are breaking. Some materials can be released and they cause some injuries or damages to other properties. Fires come from electric cutoff or like this shaking that can cause electric circuits. There can be breakage of safe electricity installations. So that time there can be fire and illnesses can be especially from waterborne and from wastes that are interrupted or that are exposed to people, and also be part of impacts. You can have more impacts, but what you are required to know in A level, it's not just stating these impacts. It is to have them from the case study. You have somewhere the earthquake has happened, now say the impacts. Which impacts have they experienced due to an earthquake? where the earthquake has happened. It's not just this stating, and that's why you see me not delaying here. Now, factors affecting damages of earthquakes. You understand that impacts are damages. So what causes or what affects the level of damages? If we say buildings are destroyed, how many buildings will be destroyed and what will cause many buildings or few buildings to be destroyed? If we say there will be like loss of some lives, how many people will die? How many people will be injured? And what is the factor causing maybe a big number of people to die or a big number of people to be injured? That's what we are meaning by this title. Factors affecting earthquake damages. So, the strength and depth of the earthquake. When the earthquake is strong, you remember from 5 upwards, you remember how we measure the intensity of the earthquake. As the intensity goes high, the damages of the earthquake also increase. But the depth also is a key factor, because when the earthquake happens close to the surface, it will cause more damages than when the earthquake happens very deep in the soil, because it will reach to the surface when the intensity has reduced. But when it is close to the surface, it causes more damages. With the population density, the higher is the population density, the more will be the impact, because if earthquake takes place, there will be many buildings, many human activities, many people ready to suffer from that earthquake. So you understand that if an earthquake happens in an urban area, it will affect many people, many properties than when it happens in a rainforest or in a desert or in a remote area. You understand that. And the types of buildings, you understand that sometimes in some countries which are used to experience earthquakes, they construct buildings which are able to withstand earthquakes. But some countries which are not used to experience earthquakes or which are poor to afford constructing proper buildings which can withstand earthquakes, we just construct any building, and when earthquake happens, then buildings will collapse. So the type of building influences the resistibility to the earthquake. And the time of the day, it goes with busy day and the night time. When it is busy day, you find that the CBDs are full of people. So if the earthquake happens in a busy day, in a busy time of the day, you will find that people are at work, are in the movement, so they are likely to be more affected than when they are at their homes where people are dispersed. So very few people will be affected compared to when it is in the daytime when people are at their work. And the distance from epicenter, you remember what epicenter is? Referring to this diagram, the focus or hypocenter is a point or a place in the ground where the earthquake starts or where it is produced, and the earthquake spreads in the form of waves. And epicenter is a point straight above the focus on the surface where the earthquake is felt. So if a place is close to the epicenter or it is on epicenter, it is likely to experience very strong earthquake and it will be highly damaged than an area that is very far from epicenter. So the closer is to the epicenter, the more damages. The further the less damages. So as you can see in this map of USA, I have 3 epicenters. I have this green, and you see the area affected by this green, the green earthquake is circled with this green circle. I don't know if you are able to see it. Red, you see the circle that shows area affected. Blue, you see the circle, but far from those points, there is no impact. So the closer to the earthquake is epicenter, the more damages are experienced. And about population density, if these two places experience earthquake, this place close to the convention center, this is in Kigali, will experience less damages than this place where you have these many buildings. So many people will lose their properties and possibly their lives. So it goes with the density. And types of rocks. Yes, types of rocks. Underlying rocks. I mean underlying rocks. So resistant rocks like granite will be able to withstand the shaking, because the shaking will not be able to easily break them. But like sedimentary rocks, which normally have the joints and the bedding planes, will be likely to break, and things above them will also collapse. It also applies to the soil, which is loose. When the earthquake happens, it is likely to fail or to result into liquefaction. So objects above it will also fail, will collapse. So you understand that when the resistance is high, the impacts or the damages are low, and vice versa. Another thing that affects the damages of earthquake are the secondary hazards. We have seen that in the primary hazards, we have ground shaking and surface faulting. As the ground shakes, there are things that can fall off, like in the shells, things can fall off, buildings can crack, can fall. Surface faulting does the same, but secondary hazards also are, sometimes they cause more damages than the primary hazards. Like if there is tsunami that is happening close to the coastal area, you can understand that very many people, many activities happening on the coast will be damaged by high waves. They even can be high to 10 meters. Imagine if the wave is 10 meters. Okay, let's say just 3 meters. A tallest person is 2 point something. So imagine 3 meters wave, anyone that is there will swim to heaven. And imagine if also it is associated with the soil or ground liquefaction or ground failure, it causes more. And now add up some mass movement like mud flow or landslides or rock falls or avalanches. So it can cause more. And they happen after the earthquake, these two. These secondary hazards. They happen after the earthquake. You can't know when it will happen, but you find that it is already there. So they surprise people when they were about to break, so they find that the secondary hazards are reaching to them. And lastly, economic development. So the higher is the level of economic development, the higher is the level of preparedness. So the rescue systems, the types of buildings, the types of infrastructures, they differ with the level of development. So when the country is highly developed, it is likely to have less damages than when a country is less developed. I was talking about the the intensity and the damages. You see in this diagram or this table, as the intensity increases, the shaking increases, but also the damages increases. This is easy. See surface fault, as I told you, a flat surface, one breaks and one part falls down. You can see the rods are no longer working, so people can't keep on driving here. See, due to faulting. This you have seen it before. Some mass movement can happen due to earthquakes. This is the avalanche. This is rockfall. This is mass landslide. See the roads are closed here. Roads are closed here. Here, if here are some settlements, they can run to heaven. So let's talk about ways of living with earthquakes and we'll see if you can complete the lesson.
Teacher, before we move there, don't you think that the impact will be greater at night than during the day?
Because during the night, everyone is in his own house. I don't think that it will be the same because normally when it is busy hours, people concentrate in the economic hours. So like the CBD will be full of people during daytime, but during nighttime it is almost empty. And settlements are not that close like when you are in the market. Imagine like the market, if it collapses, go to like Kigali City Market. This one, the new one. If it collapses during daytime, how many people are there? But during nighttime, only the security guards and the few people who can work 24 hours are there. The intensity during busy hours, more people are affected.
Okay.
Thank you.
Teacher, not necessarily at night, like some people, you tell me sometimes you don't even like hear anything or feel. So it can kill a lot of people at night because people don't feel anything because they're sleeping.
I agree with you, but remember during the daytime, some people die not because of earthquake, just because of squeezing. Like people are running very much and they knock each other and they start stepping on each other. Some die due to that reason. Like if it's a tall building full of people and the earthquake happens, everyone wants to move out of the building. The doors or the pathways become too small. So these people are not that much strong, fall down, and others don't have time to pick them up. So they step on them. That's how deadly is earthquake. So, but when you are two people and the building collapses on you, it is your family that dies. but you see these mass movements that are happening, that have been happening in northern part. A whole family can be buried and it is done. But imagine that this is happening in a market and it buries a market. How many people will die?
A lot.
Yeah, we don't mean that people will not die during that time, but the level, the extent is different.
Oh yeah, because they're not able to evacuate.
Yeah. So can I go to ways?
Yes.
This is easy. Some people, some people choose the worst way of living with earthquakes, and they just sit there. They say, "We will pray God. If the earthquake happens, He will save us. We will. If it happens that we die, that will be meaning that God has put the end to our lives. We will go to heaven or we will go to hell." So they sit there, they eat what they have, they do what they can, but when the earthquake happens, whatever happens, they accept. That's one way. Second way is some people choose to adjust their ways of living to the hazardous environment they are living in. And in this situation, you have earthquake. So they can choose to strengthen their houses so that when earthquake strikes, they are able to withstand. Another one is some people choose to leave the area. They say, this area is hazardous. I don't want to die. I still want to keep on eating on this earth. I still want to complete the mission that God has put me here for. So let me live. I will be coming here to visit people very rarely, but I'm going to a safer area. Then later, other people choose to use better forecasting and warning systems so that they can predict when the earthquake is to happen and they get prepared, as others prepare effective emergency rescues so that if it happens, they can easily rescue some people who are affected, and they can do some prediction, as I said there in the forecasting. My prediction, sometimes you can ask yourself, how do we predict earthquakes and how do you monitor them? Some ways of predicting earthquakes are here. Though the earthquake is not easily predicted, but people have tried to predict it, like to measure small scale ground changes, like to measure some small scale uplift subsidences like falling, like downward uplift downward pink. If you see some tiltiness of like plants or ground, you can think that there will be more a stronger earthquake. If you find that the rock stress is changing, you can imagine that at one time the rock can break and it can lead to earthquake, to a stronger earthquake. As they can measure some micro earthquake activities to predict that there will be a bigger or a stronger earthquake. They also use change in the Earth's magnetic field. So these are the scientific ways of monitoring earthquakes. And they also can check the resistibility of electric resistibility of rocks. So to predict. So these are the ways that expert people use that I'm not, but they are. They use them to monitor. But in your examinations, you are sometimes asked ways of predicting and monitoring earthquakes. That's why I bring it here.
Teacher, question. What is that instrument that is used to like measure the intensity of the earthquake? Something I don't know.
The
Measure.
shaking of
What's
the
that?
ground. The shaking of the ground.
I think
You are meaning
no. I mean the instrument
used it to do what?
to measure the intensity of the earthquake, something like that. That's something like scale.
Richter scale.
Oh yeah, okay, thank you. What is it used for?
to measure and record the intensity of the earthquake.
Okay, thank you.
Wait a bit. So I think we can stop from here and a little break. The summary of the lesson you will do, you will do it from the Google classes. That's where you will do it. I'm going to post for you some few titles you will fill. Just I'm putting the objectives and we'll be writing what you have seen under each objective. That's what you will do in the summary. May I thank you?
We send that
Come again.
the other PowerPoint.
The other PowerPoint.
Yeah.
Which one?
Yeah.
This one that you are sharing with us.
You want it to be there? You want me to put it there?
Pardon?
You want me to put it there?
Yeah, I want to do that.
Okay, I will do it. I'm there for
Okay.
you. So I need to
So
thank
can you
you.
also send the words those words about account, what it is and their meanings?
They are in the syllabus. They are in the syllabus. Scroll up to page what? Let me see a bit. Scroll down, but do I need to tell you the page? At your age?
Yes.
At your age?
Yes.
Okay, page 33. That's where they are. So thank you so much and have a blessed day. I'm happy to teach you the first lesson of A level. Claude is saying, Okay, greet them.
Are you in A level already?
Yes.
Yes, how is A level?
Good teacher.
It's nice.
Yes. And me from next week, I promote you to A level.
Yes.
So will you be happy for that?
Okay.
Hmm? Will you
But
be
So
happy
can
for
you give us
economics
some
now,
break of 30 minutes?
Sorry?
right?
having economy
Yeah.
To hire a break, no Rush.
Okay, I'll give you like 10 minutes before to get ready. Maybe.
Sure, God bless you.
Okay,
Webex.
not 10, from 11:20.
Teacher,
From
we doing it on
11:20.
WebEx.
Thank you. Yes.
11:20.
Yes.
So go and take your break.
Do you have the
Yes,
Webex?
teacher.
Yes,
Yes, sure.
11:20 sharp.
Thank you.
Yes, welcome.
Yes.
Okay.
Bye.
Yes, see you when you see me.
Yes.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
I've just joined.
Yes, Kado. Is it Kado? Yes.
Are we having economy?
Sorry? Okay, see you when you see me.
It's on Webex.
Who's gonna come forever, forever? Who is there on the computer? Forever. Happy, happy. Hey, kata ya. Ya, Brini. Ya, Brini.
Hi, teacher. Just a minute.
Stacy, how are you? Stacy, Stacy, how are you? Stacy Musoni.